Hello, thank you for being in a new video. This time I have a full review of the Galaxy S24 FE. Let's get started. This device is part of the FE family, which at first was intended to have a very tight price to be more attractive, but gradually has been raising its price to what we see today, which is not at all part of the essence of what at one time was the FE series. In Mexico, its launch price has been 16,999 pesos. That's more or less $850. Although remember that the prices here are not the same as over there. So, at this price, I must say that there are not many competitors. It's a gap where normally manufacturers don't put any devices. They jump up to 19,999 pesos usually, where we start to find the high end. But here is a little bigger gap left, and honestly, I would not recommend you to buy this device at this price because it is also likely that the Galaxy S24 you will already find it at this or even at a lower price. However, let's get to know this device because it is also likely that Samsung has put this high price so that on special date days they can put some very aggressive promotions. For example, in my case, I bought it almost half price at Samsung store. So definitely that with various offers and promotions can result in a very attractive option. But at the launch price it is not. So join me to know its design. On the front, we will find slightly smaller bezels than last generation, which was completely necessary. However, it still does not have symmetrical bezels. The lower bezel is much thicker than the rest. In fact, this will be the main difference from other models in the S24 series. Let's just say that its design is not as refined here on the front, although fortunately it has Gorilla Glass Victus Plus to give it a good level of protection against some fall. Speaking of protection, we find reinforced aluminum frames, which is very good. Even these frames can feel a bit sharp on the front. Fortunately, on the back they are a bit more rounded. On the right side we find the volume buttons and the power button with a small plastic band to help the connectivity of the antennas. At the top are what appear to be two microphones along with the SIM card tray, in this case with a single slot. On the left we can simply appreciate that this is a device with 8mm thick. Not bad, although it weighs 213 grams, so it is not considered to be very light. On the bottom we are going to find another two microphones along with the USB-C port and the speaker with a single perforation. The back cover will have a very minimalist design as we are used to from Samsung. In this case I have the mint color edition, but it is also available in blue, graphite gray and yellow. The color palette is considerably good. The cameras get to stand out one by one as they don't have any module that encloses them all. So I insist that Samsung has a minimalist design characteristic of all its devices. And another aspect where you can get to highlight this device is that it has the IP level of resistance against water and dust, which is what we should expect from such an expensive device. So in design, the only thing we could reproach it would be the bezels that are extremely thick, but it seems to me that it is something that Samsung does intentionally to differentiate it a little more from the Galaxy S24 Plus, which would be the model that has a similar size. The screen has increased its size with respect to the last generation, as it is now 6.7 inches in its diagonal. It offers us a full HD plus resolution, 1080 by 2340 pixels, reaching a density of 384 pixels per inch, so it is a screen that will give us good detail. In this case, it has the Dynamic AMOLED 2X technology, so it is the same technology that Samsung uses in its high-end devices. That is, we will find very good colors and good viewing angles. In addition, like all OLED screens, it has a practically perfect contrast, so the screen is an element that undoubtedly meets a very good quality. It also has 120 Hz in its refresh rate, so all movements will look fluid. It is also going to offer us 1900 nits of brightness, which is not the highlight, it is not the brightest screen, but believe me, it looks great. In fact, remember that Samsung has a technology called Vision Booster, which when it detects that you're under the sunlight, it slightly changes the colors to improve visibility. And this model also offers HDR technology for photos. That is, the photos you capture with this device will look great through this screen, since the areas of higher light will also emit more light on the screen, giving a feeling of much realism that is very complicated to show through the camera. And regarding the minimum brightness, it is also going to become very comfortable from the natural brightness control, but also in the accessibility options you can find the option of extra dimming, making it even more comfortable. The display has two color modes, one vivid and one natural. Even in the vivid setting, we will be able to find a manual adjustment of the white balance, although I would like the white balance to be adjusted automatically with a function similar to True Tone on the iPhone, but that is not available. In the advanced settings, you can specifically modify the RGB parameters or also the intensity if you want colors as saturated as possible, or not so much. In the sound, you will also notice that it is not yet a 100% high-end device as the speakers emit a lot of mid-frequencies. Personally, I found the sound a bit annoying. Remember that it has one speaker on the bottom and one on the earpiece side for calls, so we did find stereo sound, although it is not 100% symmetrical. The bottom speaker has a little more presence of bass frequencies, but not enough to consider that the sound is really good for the price at which it is distributed. Fortunately, remember that you have a 9-band equalizer, which also includes some presets, so you can get to modify the sound. In fact, in my case, I had to completely lower several mid-frequencies so that the sound started to be heard in a better way. Fortunately, the equalizer can help, but the speakers do not seem to have the best quality as we would like. Let's listen to a little test, first with the default EQ setting, and let me know what you think. Next, let's listen to how it sounds now that we lower the mid-frequencies in the EQ. The sound definitely sounds much more pleasant to me by lowering these frequencies, although that also causes the overall volume to be lowered. That's why I tell you that the sound experience does not seem to be so positive. Remember that it also includes features like Dolby Atmos to have a more immersive sound with different presets. It also has a function called Adapt Sound that allows us to adjust the type of sound depending on how you perceive it. This can vary depending on age. And it also has a UHQ optimizer that will allow us to have a high-resolution audio, but only when you use wired headphones. So that option will be disabled if you do not have wired headphones. Another feature that Samsung includes is standalone application sound, which is really useful, and I've only seen it on Galaxy devices and Vivo branded devices. This feature allows you to send audio from certain apps to a Bluetooth speaker while keeping audio from other apps on the phone, which can be very useful if you are using your cell phone at a party to play music, but suddenly you want to listen to WhatsApp audio or want to watch a video that was sent to you or something similar. In this case, it doesn't have a headphone jack, which is expected in the range, but fortunately it does support a good variety of high-resolution audio codecs over Bluetooth, so we find aptX, LDAC, and SSC. The code that is absent is LHDC, although it's a bit less common, but it's good news that you can enjoy high-resolution audio when you have wireless headphones. We will find 4 microphones in this device, some of them possibly focused on noise cancellation. Let's listen to a test.
Este es un audio grabado utilizando los micrófonos integrados del Galaxy S24 FE.
As you can notice, the audio is picked up with good quality. Next, let's listen to a test recorded with this device in a very high volume environment to try to distinguish how it behaves here. As you notice, it may have some minimal distortions, but in general, I think these are microphones that behave well, adapt their gain well, and avoid distortions due to saturation, so it could have a good performance recording concerts. Finally, regarding what has to do with sound and vibration, this device integrates a motor on the X-axis, so the vibration is much more premium compared to other devices, although it is what we could expect from this price range. The front camera is 10 megapixels with f/4 aperture and fixed focus. Having a relatively low resolution, the pixels are a bit larger, but the aperture is not that bright, and finding fixed focus on a device of this price definitely makes it bother me a lot. To enter the camera, we have a quick 2-tap gesture on the power button, and the gesture reacts very well, both when the device is locked and when you're in any other app, so you can open the camera with a lot of speed. In fact, with this same gesture, you can rotate between the rear camera and the main camera if you want. This camera is going to give us a very good response. It is a camera that feels very agile. It also offers 2 levels of amplitude, and in the upper right corner, we can activate some additional options such as filters that we can preview simultaneously. We can also access the modification of the face with 4 different parameters, of which we can also adjust its intensity. Finally, it also has the color tone adjustment in case we want a warmer selfies or with a natural tone. All selfies were taken with the warm setting. And for a comfortable capture, note that it also has palm detection for the shutter. In fact, in the settings, you could also enable floating shutter mode and capture via voice commands. So, you have several ways to make photo capture as convenient as possible. The front-facing camera is good at handling color, although in this example I'm anticipating that backlit performance might not be as adequate when the backlight isn't as noticeable. Notice that there are some burned out areas here, but as I say, the color and level of detail is also a good thing. This camera has 2 levels of amplitude, and note that in this second attempt the result came out much better in terms of its exposure, and I insist that it has a very good level of detail. The downside is that it has fixed focus, so if you want to get some close detail of your face or bring some object closer, it won't be able to focus on it. In backlit scenarios, note that the preview still doesn't look well optimized. This is something they should improve. After taking the picture, it does a better balance of highlights and shadows. So apparently, in obvious backlit conditions, it's going to perform well. In indoor scenarios with noticeably low lighting, it fortunately still manages to maintain a good level of detail. It controls noise well, and the colors also seem to me to be correctly rendered, so it also delivers with good quality here. At night, if you have some light source nearby, the result is going to be really very good. It's a camera that without a doubt has a very good quality. Even in some light backlit conditions at night, the result is going to be very good in terms of the level of detail, although it fails to properly expose the more brightly lit areas. However, where you're going to notice that it's going to suffer a lot is in much more extreme backlit conditions. Note that there is a large amount of noise. In this sense, you can still tell it's not a fully high-end device. You could also use the screen as a flash simulation to help brighten the picture better, and it does. But the color looks a little strange, especially if you're in warm conditions, as the screen has very cold light. And note that in practically twilight scenes, the preview gives us a good representation of how dark it was at that moment, and the photograph is actually very good. I like that even if you have the flash off, it emits a little circle on the screen extremely dim, so it doesn't affect it too much if you're using lenses, and that little light is enough so that with a long exposure you can have this level of illumination. It's very good in these kinds of conditions. If you use the screen as a flash simulation, you're probably going to be dazzled like I was, and that's why I closed my eyes. I don't recommend it. The portrait photography with selfie at night I really liked. Unlike other devices, this one in portrait does not retain so much noise, has a good level of detail, and evidently makes a good background blur. However, unfortunately, in the daytime test, we realized that it does not manage to keep objects in focus, something that is strange because Samsung usually has this better detection, but apparently not in this model. So the recommended thing to do when taking selfies with the front camera is to do it without any objects nearby so that you have a more natural result. On the back, we will find the ultra-wide camera with a focal length of 13mm, f2.2 aperture and 12 megapixels on its sensor. However, it is a fixed focus camera, so it is not as advanced as we would like in this price range. The main camera has a focal length of 24mm, a 50 megapixel sensor and f1.8 aperture with autofocus and optical stabilization. Let's say that this camera is the most outstanding, as the last camera has a sensor of only 8 megapixels, a little lower resolution than the regular Galaxy S24. It offers us a focal length of 75mm, that is optical zoom 3 equus approximately, with f2.4 aperture, autofocus and optical stabilization. It is not a bad photographic system, however, in this price range we would like to see something more advanced because we have not seen so much progress in this aspect in Samsung. Although note how again the camera will have a really very agile behavior, you can also slide down the shutter to access a burst of up to 100 photos. And in our test trying to capture number 3, we found that it does have a really good response speed. In fact, the burst is also going to activate with very good speed, and notice that the distance between one photo and another is very small, so the experience is very good for capturing the exact moment. Here on the rear camera, we are also going to find the button to be able to take a quick look at the filters with an individual intensity selector, or also for facial beauty effects, which just like on the front camera are 4 parameters. You can also tap to adjust the focus or exposure, and even lock these parameters if you don't want them to be changed. But you can also access the professional mode, where we will find much more advanced things. For example, the ISO can be raised up to 3200. Also, the shutter speed can be increased up to 30 seconds. There is also the exposure compensation parameter, focus, and white balance, so everything can be manipulated manually. However, this device does not have Expert RAW, so you don't have such an advanced function. However, in the settings, you could enable a capture in a RAW mode, but as I say, it is not as advanced as Expert RAW, available in more expensive devices. Finally, remember that it also integrates automatic detection of QR codes from the main camera interface, and it also has a scanner. Note that when it detects a sheet, a button appears in the corner, which will allow you both to extract the text in digital format and to save this cropped capture, although it does not allow you to apply filters to improve the scanner, nor does it allow you to add several pages in the same document or anything like that. So it is a very simple scanner which is getting old compared to other manufacturers. This device does integrate a high resolution mode in the camera, and it does show a very detailed picture. They are not just for show. If you want, you can get these very high resolution pictures, so you can apply some cropping and still see a very good quality picture. Notice that in motion scenes the ultra-wide camera does a good job, as long as there is good lighting in the environment. The main camera also does a good job with these types of scenes. The telephoto camera is a bit slower, so it is likely to be more difficult to capture the moment. Also, it may even generate some overexposure in these types of scenes where there is a lot more movement. But speaking specifically of motion capture, note that the telephoto camera may generate some distortion in some areas of maximum movement, such as these shores. It's not such a big deal, but if you're a stickler for photography, you'll notice it. Notice how, for example, with the main camera, this same sweep or distortion that can be generated with the telephoto camera does not happen, although the ultra-wide camera will also have this small detail. The ultra-wide camera outdoors will give us a saturated color without reaching the extreme, but it is an intense color. Fortunately, the photo looks with a good quality, although in the edges we could find some small distortions that are not so serious. The main camera maintains a color representation very similar to what we see in the ultra-wide camera, which is positive to have a similar experience between all cameras. Notice that the result is also positive. In this case, you don't see any distortions on the edges or anything weird in the picture. On the contrary, it is of very good quality and with a very good level of detail. Remember that it also allows you to take pictures with a 2x zoom setting, trying to maintain optical quality. The truth of the matter is that it does have good detail, although I wouldn't say it looks like optical quality. In the 3x zoom setting, we will specifically find the telephoto camera, which will also allow you to have a good quality, and again with very similar colors. But now let's take a look at the full zoom range from the ultra-wide camera through the main camera, the telephoto camera, and then starting to apply digital zoom. Unfortunately, the telephoto camera only has an 8 megapixel sensor, which is lower than what we see on other devices, but I'm surprised that even with 8 megapixels, Samsung does a good job. I would love to see them put a higher resolution sensor on it so Samsung does an even better job, but we don't see that available. The maximum zoom is 30x, but obviously at this setting we're going to notice some things a bit more artificial, as it's done 100% through artificial intelligence. Nevertheless, I think the result is quite good. At 10x, I think that would be the maximum setting where the quality is really good. Beyond 10x, you start to notice a bit more strange results. In indoor shots on a relatively dark day, I found that the camera does a good job of reducing noise and maintaining detail. With the main camera, it will obviously be even better quality and better lighting, so it is more recommendable because you notice that it controls noise well, even in the darkest areas where you only get to see a bit of graininess, but overall it does a good job. The telephoto camera also does a good job in these indoor scenarios. In backlit situations, it should be noted that the camera does do a good job from the preview, where it doesn't seem to be such a difficult situation, but we tested it at the same time as other phones and they did overexpose from the preview. So take a look at the result. With the ultra-wide camera, we see a good balance of highlights and shadows, although perhaps at the edges it could get to generate a little more chromatic aberration, and there are some areas that due to the long exposure could look slightly strange with a little halo, but the overall picture is good. The main camera does a better job in this type of scenarios, especially in the shadow area where it manages to collect much more lighting, preserves textures well, and colors come out right. And the remarkable thing is that the telephoto camera also manages to maintain a good performance in these backlit conditions. At night, the ultra-wide camera does a decent job, although there is a lot more noise and grain present in the darker areas. The main camera improves mostly in this aspect of noise management, although it is not a completely clean photo, but it maintains a good level of detail in these dark areas, and the exposure of the most illuminated areas is slightly good, but could be improved. With the telephoto camera, we will also find a good result, but I would not say it is an expert device in photography. It seems that Samsung is falling a little short when it comes to handling difficult situations. And in very dark scenes, this would be the preview with the ultra-wide camera, so you have more or less a reference. And the result with the ultra-wide camera is not as positive as we would have liked, although I must admit that it was a very dark picture, but I think for the price we can demand more. The main camera notes how it improves in a very important way with respect to what we saw in the ultra-wide camera, showing a completely superior quality, and if you try to use the telephoto camera in these very dark environments, you'll really only be using digital zoom. The main camera has good versatility, as you see how it would allow us to have a close focus for very good quality macro shots. In fact, you can apply a little bit of digital zoom and see what it's capable of showing, so we definitely appreciate that they didn't incorporate a useless macro camera, but the main camera manages to do a very good job. Something that I also really like about this device is that you can use the panorama mode with the ultra-wide camera, so you can achieve extremely wide shots of very good quality with good resolution, and it even keeps the HDR performance well in this kind of wide shots. With respect to portrait photography, note that the device does a good job with the virtual zoom setting. Very small objects can be a bit difficult to keep in focus, but it makes a good effort. It also lets you take portrait shots with a virtual zoom setting, where it also does a good job. It looks nice blurring out the background, although it's going to have an even harder time detecting very small objects. And with the virtual zoom setting, curiously in this case, the focus doesn't seem to be as nice. You don't see such a high level of detail, and it is still difficult to detect small objects. Even some edges you notice that look a bit strange, so complicated portraits don't seem like they're going to come out very well on this device. But curiously, at night I put it to the test again and observed that it generates a very nice blur effect in the background, and despite not having so much illumination, it maintains the level of detail well. Although you can get to see a little noise and grain, especially in the darker areas. With the 2x zoom setting, we also see a good quality, and here it strikes me that the area of the lens does manage to keep it in focus with good quality. And with the 3x zoom setting is where we would find the best portrait quality. Although again the level of detail is not so high, but if you do not zoom you will notice a good photo quality, especially for the good detection it has in these complicated areas of the lens. Although it would be good a better treatment of noise and grain that in this case is not so advanced. For video recording, there is excellent news, as this device can reach up to 8K in its resolution, something that at this price is undoubtedly very outstanding. In fact, there are much more expensive devices that can only record in 4K at 60 frames per second. Evidently, this device also has that capability, although it is worth making the clarification that in 8K you will only be able to use the main camera. And in 4K at 60 frames per second, you can use both the main camera and the front camera. All cameras can record in 4K at 30 frames per second, but the bad news is that if you want to record at 60 frames per second, even in Full HD, you can only do it with the main camera. Neither the ultra-wide camera nor the telephoto camera is available, although at least the front camera is. When recording a video, you can take pictures, you can also pause and resume your recording, you can even rotate to the front camera without stopping the recording. That's something that few devices allow, and it's also going to allow you to turn on the flashlight without the need to stop your video recording as long as you're not using the ultra-wide camera, because in this setting you curiously disable the flash button. Notice that there is also this convenient slider to manipulate the zoom so the recording is good. In fact, it also has a button for an automatic framing and always keep in the center some person who is appearing framed. And note that we are also going to find the professional video mode, which allows us to move a lot of manual parameters just like in manual photography. But in this case, it even has the microphone setting, although I find it very curious that it only captures omnidirectional audio. It is not capable of capturing front audio or rear audio like other Samsung devices. It only allows us to change the audio input from a USB device, Bluetooth, or a mix. The quality of video recording with the ultra-wide camera does not seem to be that appealing. Some areas of chromatic aberration are noticeable even though the level of detail is 4K. Although it is positive that it supports this resolution, but I would have liked to see a little more quality in the lens because yes, you will notice a significant difference in quality when you switch to the main camera, where we will find much more definition, higher quality, even the colors look better represented, so definitely in video recording, the three cameras are not at the same level. The telephoto camera seems to me to have a good quality, so the ultra-wide camera is the one that is a bit lacking when testing video recording. In indoor scenes on a relatively dark day, we notice that the ultra-wide camera also suffers a lot to have a good noise control. You get to notice a lot the moment when it tries to blur it, and notice how with the main camera this is not so distinguishable. So again, it is more advisable to record with the main camera. And in these darker environments, the telephoto camera is also going to suffer a little bit more than it should. In backlit scenarios, they seem to do a good job. Even the ultra-wide camera, despite not detecting a face present in the scene, does a good balance of highlights and shadows. Or even if the face is a little closer, we still see a good job. Although the main camera definitely that does an even more advanced job, having a less overexposed lit area. So really the performance in these kinds of conditions is positive. Even with the telephoto camera, although with this one you start to notice a bit more overexposure in the more lit areas, but we could say that in general the video recording in backlight does resolve it with good quality. At night, something very similar to what we saw indoors is going to happen. The ultra-wide camera is going to struggle a lot more to handle the noise. So for the price, we would ask for something a bit more advanced. The main camera gets better at handling noise, but it doesn't balance the highlight and shadow areas very well. So if you're recording a very dark area, it does a good job as long as there's no light source present in the scene. Because otherwise, it's going to make the darker areas darker than they should be. So the result is not so advanced in night backlighting. But overall, we could say that the performance will be positive. The telephoto camera will obviously also suffer in dark scenarios as it does not have as much aperture. In fact, it will usually prioritize using digital zoom, but in this case I forced it to use optical zoom, and notice the difference between 2.9 and 3x's so you can more or less see. At either setting, the quality doesn't seem very good to me, but definitely that the digital zoom manages to gather much more illumination. Regarding stabilization, the device does a good job. Notice that with the ultra-wide camera, when walking, the movement looks well balanced. Even when running, I think it does a good job, although you start to notice a little bit more compensating movements, so it's not as advanced stabilization for action scenes from this automatic mode. Switching to the main camera, we still notice this same good level of stabilization. When you're walking, the movements are very good. When you're running is when the compensating movements are going to be a little bit more abrupt than usual. And with the telephoto camera, it seems to me that there is definitely not a good result when walking, much less if you go with more action. However, remember that a super stable mode is built in that will use the ultra-wide camera by default, so if you're walking there's virtually no compensation movement, and if you're running it's going to do a better job than what we saw with the main camera. In fact, despite being in super stable mode, you can switch to the main camera to test how it is, and in this case it does improve significantly. although it is more advisable to record with the ultra-wide camera so that the movements look less jerky. Fortunately, the device will allow us to dynamically switch between the three cameras. The ultra-wide camera has more noise, and this is what we had noticed previously. The main camera does a better job, although it is curious that when you zoom in, the noise is more intense, and when you stop zooming in, the noise is better controlled. In this case, the maximum zoom is 12x, so it doesn't have as much detail or as much range. In the price range, perhaps we could find better proposals talking specifically about the zoom. This device will also allow us to record video in a portrait mode to blur the background. Although the work can become inaccurate at the edges, it does not seem to detect objects well, although fortunately it maintains the effect if it fails to detect any face present. The intensity of the blur doesn't seem to vary depending on the distance from the person, so let's say it's a bit simple in this respect. Some larger objects can be kept in focus more easily, and interestingly, it also allows us to zoom in for a more professional telephoto perspective. The fast camera mode does have stabilization, and it is in 4K, so it is of good quality and allows us a basic speed setting for people movements that can be quite useful, although the fastest setting is not as fast as other devices that would allow us a much more advanced time-lapse of landscapes. One very positive thing is that it allows us to record in 4K at 120 frames per second for slow motion, something that definitely few if any devices will be able to do in this price range. This would be one of the most advanced factors compared to any other competitor. Without a doubt, the slow motion is spectacular. It also allows us to record at 240 frames per second in full HD if you want a slightly slower scene, although you sacrifice a bit of detail level. However, it still looks good quality as a result. Focusing, note that it can do it with a good quality. Let's say it has a medium speed to have a good balance between good speed and stable focus. In this sense, I find nothing to complain about because the device gives a very good result. The front camera meets good quality recording in 4K, so the level of detail is really very good. However, in backlight, it doesn't perform as spectacularly as what we saw in the rear camera, plus it has fixed focus. So, it is a camera that falls short of what one would expect in a device that wants to become high-end. Indoors, on a relatively dark day, the result was not so pleasant, although I insist that it was a darker day than usual when we usually do these tests. Then there is much more noise, a vibration-like effect in the darker areas that is not so pleasant. And in the evening, something similar will happen in the darker areas, although if you're a bit close to some nearby light source, it's going to be a better result. But the darker it gets, the more the stabilization will cause a vibration that's not as nice. It doesn't handle noise as excellently. So in these tricky environments is where you notice that it's still not a fully high-end device. As additional modes, we do find a fast camera mode for the front camera in 4K. Interestingly, there is also the slow motion mode for this front camera in case you see it necessary for some creative scene. And also available is the portrait mode in 4K, something that is very prominent in the price range, which would allow you to blur the background and is even able to keep some objects in focus well enough. It doesn't do it 100%, but it does it better than still photography, interestingly enough. So the front portrait recording I did like. In fact, you can switch to other effects, although they look much more artificial in their intensity. You could also switch to the black and white effect, keeping only your body in color, or apply a glitch effect as a more creative scene. Dual recording mode is also available, so you can display both the rear camera and the front camera. In this case, you can move this small box that has rounded corners, so its appearance and functionality is good in this regard. Although it does not let you resize the box that is floating, what it does allow you to do is rotate without the need to stop the video recording, but it doesn't allow you to switch between cameras either. So, if you want to switch to the main camera, you must first stop video recording and then reselect the cameras. With the main camera, note that the device does keep autofocus enabled, but you can't zoom. So even though there are some positive things about this dual recording mode, the fact that it doesn't allow us to switch between cameras and have this zoom completely fixed makes it get a bit annoying. Because if you want to zoom in a bit, you need to switch to the telephoto camera, but for that you have to stop recording and start it again. But even though we are using the telephoto camera, it doesn't allow us to apply a little more digital zoom. You can also have a split screen mode, and one thing I noticed throughout all this testing is that sun reflections can affect the front camera a little too much. This device comes with Android 14 and running on the One UI version of Android. The good news is that it has the promise of 7 years of software updates and 7 years of security patches. It falls under Samsung's new policy, which is undoubtedly the best we are currently seeing in the Android world. So it's a device that's going to have a good lifetime talking in terms of software support. And you know, Samsung offers a tremendous amount of added options. So for example, we'll find a theme store where you can buy the full theme, wallpapers, it can even be just icons or always on display skins. So you have a tremendous amount of options to customize your device. Speaking of always on display, note that in this case it comes with a traditional mode, unlike the rest of the Galaxy S24 series that would even allow you to keep a dimmed image as a sort of always on display background. So here the implementation is a bit simpler. Remember that on the lock screen, you have access to some widgets by tapping on the clock, like giving you a quick glance at the alarms, see the player, voice recorder, and a few other things. You can even reorder the appearance of these lock screen widgets, but they are only system widgets. In this case, it doesn't offer such advanced customization of the lock screen in the traditional way, although if you install Good Lock, you might have a bit more options. However, it does allow you to modify the clock, add some indicator widgets to this screen as well, and change the shortcuts. It also integrates easy mode, which I call grandfathered in because it makes everything much bigger. And one of Samsung's flagship features called Panels Edge, where you have several shortcuts to access apps and you can add more panels available. So it's not just shortcuts to apps, but it can also be shortcuts to some contacts, to tools, and some other special widgets that show you more information, even with access to download more widgets from the Galaxy Store and be able to customize 100% your experience on this phone. In fact, from this section of Panels Edge, you also have quick access to your recent apps or also to the new Smart Selection tool, which allows you to quickly lock in whatever it is you want to capture. In some cases, if it detects a location or address, it can suggest you to go directly to the map. And you can also pin this content to continue viewing it at any time, which is useful when trying to copy some content or something similar. Or you could also easily save these screenshots, share them, or extract text. So it's quite a useful tool, the Smart Selection tool. Remember that also by holding down the power button, you can talk to Bixby, Samsung's virtual voice assistant. Bixby is not known for being very smart, so several things it will ask Google, but you can ask it for things to control the system. For example, open the camera in selfie mode, and watch how it immediately performs the actions in a very precise way. If you're using manual brightness and you suddenly go outside, it might also be useful to tell it, set the brightness to maximum. And notice that the truth is that controlling things in the system works very well. You could also create reminders, set alarms. Overall, it's an assistant that works well for managing the phone. Don't ask it for information because it doesn't master that. However, it could also turn on the house lights or whatever you have set up. Within the advanced features section is the labs option, which are experimental features where you can force all apps to run in multi-screen. That's something that only Samsung currently has available, so that any app you want to open will work in this floating window mode. Notice that you just need to press and hold on it, and if you release its icon in the center, it opens in floating window, while if you release it up or down, it can also open split screen mode. The truth is that Samsung has very advanced features in this aspect, which you could also improve if you install Good Lock, which is a special module that Samsung has available in the Galaxy Store. But notice how you can open a lot of apps in this floating mode to do several things at once. You can also minimize them quickly if you want to have quick access to some of these tools and options. Then the level of productivity you achieve can become very good. In fact, also these windows have some level of transparency, so you can see several things at the same time, and you could also minimize them in a bubble format if you don't like to have them minimized on the side. You could also add the controls directly on top to minimize them faster, although they use more space. And in case you use the split screen feature, note that also these apps will remain linked in the recent apps list, and you can also add a shortcut to both apps from the home screen or from the Edge panel section to open with speed 2 apps that you usually use together. It supports up to 5 apps open in Windows, and we are also going to find several motions and gestures that we can use to control the device in some way. Some are more useful than others. In general, this is not that prominent. The one-handed use mode I do like a lot because it is not only going to resize on the vertical axis but also on the horizontal axis, so everything is easy to reach. In fact, you can also change the orientation easily, and you could also change the size of this mini screen to adjust it completely to your liking. The customization is so good that it is also going to allow us to reposition this window if we want it to be a little bit higher, so it ensures us very good comfort. Note that it also has tools to make video calls, for example, to replace the background with a solid fill or to replace the background with an image that we want to place specifically. These options are compatible with Google Meet, Teams, WhatsApp, and Zoom. To use them, note that just scroll the notification panel down twice, and in this case we can, as I anticipated, change to any image that we want or blur the background or put a solid fill. It even has facial softness options to make you look a little more beautiful, in addition to the color tone that you can turn it into an image a little cooler, a little warmer, a little lighter, or a little darker. So it allows you to have good modifiers for these types of video calls. It even has an automatic framing function that does not support background modification but allows you to be always centered even if the cell phone is completely fixed. As always, we must also highlight the incorporation of Samsung members that will give you access to a Samsung community platform where we will be able to find many discount coupons that Samsung offers you for being a Galaxy user. Plus, you can report any problems or chat with other users of the community. There are also routines that are definitely very useful to automate all kinds of things on your phone. For starters, there are the modes that can also be synchronized with your watch, and in this way you can adjust with a single touch several things. The detection can be based on your location or based on a schedule that you can set and see how you can make it change some things to help you concentrate. You can restrict the use of some apps, turn on Do Not Disturb mode, activate some power saving mode, or add some specific action on all the settings that Samsung gives you available. So these are very comprehensive modes that definitely come in handy. But if you want another level of automation, you can go into the routines where you can explore routines that have already been created, or you can create your own routines based on causes and consequences. So the conditions are also very extensive. It can be from receiving some notification with a specific message or reaching a certain battery level or many others, and the consequences are also very extensive. So the routines and the modes are unique to Samsung. It's something that you don't find on other devices, and believe me, they are quite useful. Inside the gallery, you will find some curious tools. For example, if you have a picture of a person, you can load a special animation effect that observes that with artificial intelligence can try to apply this effect as if it were a small video with slight depth. Then it can be a little bit attractive also to give a little more life to the photographs. Likewise, here's going to give you some other suggestions. For example, you could blur the background even if the photo was not originally captured with portrait mode. In the photo editor also includes an object eraser that is not yet the generative artificial intelligence that Samsung uses with Galaxy AI, but it can also get to work in some environments as this is available without internet connection, but the result is not as advanced as Galaxy AI. From the same gallery, you can also select several images in case you want to create a collage or a video or even a GIF animation. And if you hold down, you can also extract some people or some object from your image. You can even have some level of multitasking to switch to some other app and then release to be able to send. Although in this case, I would like it to be sent as a sticker and not as an image, but it is a tool. Also note that we can extract text from some photos or videos, so it can become easy to do this action as well. Also remember that you can transform any video into slow motion if you press and hold on it. Notice that immediately the video starts to play in a slower format without interpolated frames, and when you release you can save this little clip as a separate video, and believe me, it is of very good quality, practically as if you had recorded it in slow motion originally. One of the main benefits of this device is that it comes with the entire Galaxy AI suite available, so you can certainly take advantage of many of these features. For example, there's the call assistant. Through this tool, you can transcribe calls, even go translating in real time to talk to people in another language, and it allows you to select which voice you want to use and whether you want to hear the original voice or just hear the translated voice, or have the other person hear your original voice or just the translated voice. So this whole package is very advanced, and in this case it works without the need of any internet connection. Then we will find the chat assistant that includes multiple options inside. To begin with, notice that it would allow us to translate a specific chat. You can activate it from the keyboard and you can translate to multiple languages depending on your configuration. Then notice how it shows us the original message and at the bottom the translated message, so it can be a useful tool if you work with people who speak multiple languages. Also, in any chat directly from the keyboard, you can open the editor that does work with internet connection. Here you only need to enter a short text and it will transform it into another style, although you have a limit of 125 characters. It is worth reminding you that whenever you have the keyboard open, you can hold down the dictation button. Please put your heart into your work because we have to get it out this weekend. And watch how we are going to transform this message into a slightly more respectful tone, and after a few seconds the result is there. Let's put insert and it immediately appears in the text box. So as you realize, it can help to compose a better structured message with a simple step. Within the editor, we find not only the respectful format, but there is also an informal and professional format. For example, we are going to put it in an informal format, and instead of standard, we are going to put it as if it were a comment. So as you can see, there are several categories to generate different types of text, and we can insert them all quickly. Then notice that there is also another function called writing style that would allow us to transform any text that we already have written in the message. And notice that by simply clicking on this writing style button, it will immediately suggest some other formats. The editor does require an internet connection, but the writing style does not. Notice that here it shows us several options that we can have. Obviously, being a short text, there is not so much variation between all the proposals, but the longer the text is, the more proposals it will give you. You can also filter by different categories. For example, if you are going to publish on your social networking page, you can set it to use emojis, and that's it. Also note that it also has a spelling and grammar checker. It will not only check that the words are spelled correctly, but also that the text makes sense. For example, it is changing one of the functions to the phrase one of the functions, so it can also help you to check that everything is spelled perfectly. These are the tools included in the Chat Assistant keyboard. And we will also find the interpreter that comes a bit hidden inside the additional options in the Quick Settings panel. This interpreter can also work without the need for internet connection, so if you go on a trip, you would not be consuming your mobile data, although you have to download the necessary language packs first. And in addition to this traditional mode, it has a conversation mode where the screens can be inverted so that each person can see the text in their own direction. And if you use Galaxy Buds, you can also improve this experience even more. Watch how it works.
Hi, can you help me, please?
Hola, ¿puedes ayudarme, por favor?
Claro, ¿en qué te puedo ayudar?
Of course. What can I help you with?
I need to know where the restroom is.
Que necesito saber dónde está el baño.
Está fácil llegar. Ve al fondo a la derecha.
It's easy to get there. Go to the bottom right.
Oh, thank you.
Por eso, oh, gracias.
De nada, un placer.
As you realize, it is a feature that is interesting and useful, but could still improve because some translations are not done accurately. We are also going to find the Notes Assistant that, as its name suggests, will be inside the Samsung Notes app. Among them, there are many options. For example, it can automatically format with header or bullet style some text that you have selected within your note. Just open the Galaxy AI button options and it will show you several proposals with automatic formatting, with headings, bullets, and more things that can also help you give a different and attractive touch to your notes. We will also find the option to summarize where, again, you must select the text you want to summarize and then the artificial intelligence can show you specific points. In fact, you can change the style of the summary if you want a standard summary or a detailed one to have a little more information. So it can also be useful for speed reading or for studying some content. And just as we saw with the keyboard, it can help you to correct your spelling. These first three options will require an internet connection, but the translator option can be used without the need for an internet connection. So fortunately, you have a number of options that do not require an internet connection but work directly on the device. That we are also going to find the transcription wizard that will work with the voice recorder. This tool can be especially useful when you have some meetings because look at how it can transcribe locally the recording. This recording is not sent to the cloud. In fact, you could disconnect from the internet and it is going to be able to do it anyway as long as you have downloaded the packages. I should warn you that it is not a fast transcription, so it takes some time, but fortunately the process is done locally. So I am going to wait a little bit of time to show you the result, and notice how when it is finished it can show you the transcript even separated if there are several voices present. And besides showing you the whole transcript, you can activate a summary, which again will take some time to do, but this is much faster. It is also going to be done locally, and it even shows you keywords to understand the main theme of the whole recording. So as I say, it can be very useful. And again, for this summary we are also going to have the possibility to translate it to any other language and directly from Samsung Notes. And directly from Samsung Notes, you could also make your recordings, transcriptions and summaries without the need to use the voice recorder separately. So now everything is already integrated. If you use the Samsung Internet browser, you also get artificial intelligence tools. Note that you can simply press the Galaxy button and then summarize, so you can quickly see concretely what this web page is saying. You could also have a little more detailed summary in case you want additional information. And in addition to that, you could also translate the pages directly. But the interesting thing about this tool is that it shows you the main topic of the recording, and it even shows you keywords so you can understand the main topic of the recording. So as I say, it can be very useful. And again, for this summary we will have the possibility also to translate it to any other language. And again, for this summary we will have the possibility also to translate it to any other language pages directly. But the interesting thing about this tool is that it not only translates the text, but even any image that you see on top of this web page, it is also going to be able to translate. Then it is a tool that could also be useful. There are many languages available that I remind you can download, so you can use them without consuming your mobile data, and this is another attractive option of Galaxy. And there, remember that there is also the artificial intelligence editor. You simply have to press the Galaxy button and there and see how, for example, we could hold down on a person to move it to another place, and you can even resize it, and the fill will do it with generative artificial intelligence. And you can see that the result is very good. So it not only allows you to delete objects or people, but even move them or resize them. And you can see that the result is really very good. So it has great capabilities to do these actions. The fill that it has done is very positive. And as I say, it can not only help you to move objects, but you can also delete them completely. Just hold down on them and then select the delete button and then use the generative artificial intelligence fill, and you are done. I think the result is one of the best that we are going to find. Although this function requires an internet connection, the same will happen with the portraits we can open Galaxy and then press Portrait Studio. And there are several categories that we can use for this decoration, for example animation. And again, we wait a few seconds to generate all this if it requires internet connection, but the results will be very good. It will give you several options that you can use. In this case, I think it has not hit very well, maybe because it was a backlit scene. Let's see if with a better lit scene we have better results. I will select again the animation function, and here it is. In this case, I think it did get a better result with this. I confirm that the result may vary depending on the light condition of the photograph, but in the same way you can generate in other styles of portrait. And remember that all this is completely free, at least for the moment, but the results without a doubt that can be attractive will also be available. The option of sketch to image, where you can simply add a doodle and it will transform it into something more realistic. For example, let's try. something more realistic. For example, let's try something that will be more realistic. For example, let's try something. Let's see if I get it right. According to me, this is a kind of dinosaur. Let's see if it understands it. Obviously, the more precise you are in your drawing, you will have more attractive results. I made a doodle too simple. It understood as if it was a dove. It's not bad. It even added its shadow, so it could also be a bit fun to generate this kind of results. I'm going to keep this one. Also, we will find artificial intelligence to generate some wallpapers. Just select some categories among different words, so you get to generate some wallpaper completely to your liking. For example, in this case it says a painting of, and you can select any category you want. For example, let's put urban landscape and robots with expressionist style. Now let's press the generate button, and again we wait a little time. This function also requires internet connection, and ready with this you can get to generate some unique wallpapers that no one else is going to have. In fact, you could also transform your own wallpaper so that depending on the current weather, different animations appear on your background. And if you have the Galaxy Watch 7 or Galaxy Watch Ultra, you can also get the energy score with an artificial intelligence analysis. Plus, through the watch notifications, it will give you suggested answers and not just default answers. And like all Android, remember, you also have access to Gemini. If you swipe from a corner to the center, the artificial intelligence assistant, you could ask him what you want. I'm just going to give you an example. I want to know what would be the best destinations for a vacation this Christmas with a one-year-old baby, and watch how it will immediately give me some suggestions with some other things, and I can continue the conversation to ask for more information. Just remember that this is in virtually all Android. However, the artificial intelligence suite, as I told you, is the most attractive in this cell phone. Let's talk about security. We find fingerprint reader inside the screen is an optical reader, so you cannot use it if your finger is a little wet, and supports 3 records only. I think that's one of the biggest limitations compared to all other competitors that allow 5 records. Also integrates facial recognition, but it is only in 2 dimensions. Also find the extended unlock that allows the device to stay unlocked in secure environments in order not to have to put your fingerprint every time. Also has Samsung piece from which you can fill out forms automatically, or you can even access from the keyboard to this Samsung piece information that is fully protected with your fingerprint. And in this case, you can have login information from bank cards, addresses, or specific notes that you can insert very easily directly from the keyboard. Is also present secure folder. To access this folder, you can select a different password than your lock screen. Here you have completely separate applications, and you can also add more applications or add any type of video, audio file, whatever, all protected with your fingerprint or a separate password. Remember that there is also Samsung Kids. If the shortcut does not appear, you can search for Kids, and any way you can find it. This is a safe environment for children, so you can be sure that they will not enter any other application when you lend them. Samsung suggests some applications designed especially for them, but you can also manually add any other application that you have installed on your phone so they can play or entertain themselves for a moment safely. Add any other application you have installed on your phone so they can play or entertain a moment safely. In fact, you can also access the parental controls to determine the time limit they will have. Set a time to go to sleep, among many other things that can allow you a comfortable experience when you lend your phone. If you use to connect constantly to public Wi-Fi networks, you will appreciate the secure Wi-Fi feature. That is a private VPN offered by Samsung. Gives you a free plan with 1 GB per month, or you can have a subscription for unlimited protection. Also allows you to now encrypt your backups or data that you are synchronizing with your Samsung account, and like all current Android, already integrates more protection against theft, so it can be blocked if it detects that it has been stolen. Although I have not specifically tested this feature, also includes the automatic blocker that comes on by default. This will prevent you install applications from unknown sources, and when connecting this device to public USB plugs can also be very useful, among other things. By the way, the device also allows you to clone some messaging applications to use 2 accounts on the same phone, and has an antivirus in collaboration with McAfee to scan against any risk of malware. If you get to lose your phone, not only accounts with the function of Find My Google device, but you will also have the own network of Samsung. This through its application Samsung Find, and through a map you can see the location not only of this phone but all devices with your account Samsung. As for the battery life, there is a bit bittersweet feeling. Its capacity is 4,700 milliampere hours, is a little smaller capacity than we are used to in the average cell phone, and considering that it is a slightly large device, the battery, if it falls short, especially if you have a very intense use, this processor is very inefficient when we are demanding too much work. Then if you wanted, for example, to play or to be editing video with heavy workloads, you will definitely perceive that the battery will run out very fast. On the contrary, if you are a user, a little more than a small user, you will notice that the battery runs out very quickly. On the contrary, if you are a more casual user who uses social networks and everyday things, the battery may surprise you, because in my tests of draining, the battery in the foreground reached 2 hours with 52 minutes when the average cell phone reaches more than 4 hours, then if it falls very short in that aspect. But when I did this test in the background, exceeded 6 hours when there are many devices that are still very close to 4 hours, then why I said that the feeling is a little bittersweet, possibly. If you activate the power saving mode, you can get to extend even more the battery, limited to 4 hours. In fact, for emergencies, it also has the ultra power saving mode that could help. And with regard to the load, remember that supports 25 watts load. Although the charger must be purchased separately, that is something that still bothers a lot, but increasingly we get more accustomed to happen. In Samsung, fortunately, is a considerably fast charge, especially during the first 45 minutes. You are seeing a graph of our analysis of load, and note how practically during the first 30 minutes and even a little bit more, it maintains a charge at a very high power. So in 15 minutes it recovered 26% of the battery. In 30 minutes it got up to 53%, and then it starts to slow down a little bit more to take care of the battery a little bit, and it charged from 0 to 100 in 1 hour and 20 minutes. It is not a spectacularly fast charge. In fact, we could say it is a slow charge considering what other manufacturers do, and considering that it is not such a big battery, then I think it does not stand out neither in battery life nor in charging speed, unfortunately. The good thing is that we will find wireless charging 15 watts, which gives you a little more comfort. Obviously not going to be a very fast charge, but very comfortable. Also find reversible wireless charging, so you could put to charge your headphones on top of the back of this phone. Although I must say that neither the Galaxy Watch 7 nor the Galaxy Watch Ultra support this type of charging, which I find but I don't know why Samsung did that. It also has good battery protection mechanisms like the smart charging that learns your routine to not charge so fast, but on the contrary, charge slowly, until the time is about to arrive when you usually always unplug it. And we will also find the charging lock function useful for those moments where the charger is plugged in all the time. Now let's talk about the connectivity. This device I think meets very well in every way. Has 5G connectivity also through the software. You can choose how applications will connect to the internet, so you avoid bad surprises in your data plan consumption. Other good news is that it has support for eSIM. So it is very useful when you go traveling, because you do not need to buy cards without physical, but simply acquire a virtual SIM and install it by scanning a QR code. And since this cell phone supports YSIM, let me tell you about Aira, which is a service that offers you a YSIM in case you are going to travel. It can be very convenient. Just hire it before you travel and you will receive a QR code to your email, or also from the same Aira application you can have it available, this QR code that will be sent to your email address. You can have this QR code available that you will later install on your cell phone with YSIM. Just make sure you do not activate the YSIM before you are already traveling. Just install it and leave it ready, so that once you are in the country you want to travel, you can activate this eSIM, and ready you will be able to enjoy the service as you have contracted it. Enjoy the service as you have contracted it. For example, let's say you want to go to Europe. You can see that they offer various plans at the time of recording this video. They would offer you a gigabyte for 7 days at $5. Obviously, there are also plans of 30 days with greater capacities or even longer duration of time. Everything will depend on you as a user. So in the description, I leave the link so you can go to acquire your YSIM with Aira. I personally already tried it when I went to Berlin, and it worked perfectly well. This is one of the advantages of having a device with YSIM. In addition, we will find support for Wi-Fi Network 6E, which is a very modern standard. Is not the most modern, but I think it competes very well to give you good download speeds of all content. Also integrates Bluetooth 5.3 NFC to make mobile payments or anything else that uses this chip, but does not have FM radio, which was expected. Also has wireless screen projection through Smart View, so you could even project only an application and then minimize it to continue using your cell phone in anything else while while you continue doing that projection, you can also prevent notifications from being seen on the big screen, but you can still see them on your phone. So it is a projection that we could consider advanced. You also have wired screen projection for more stability and less latency in this kind of scenarios. So it really is an attractive option because usually this is only available on high-end devices. So if you find this one at a very low discounted price, it can be very useful. It even has Samsung DX, which is something that, for example, several Galaxy Z Flip do not have. So this is a tool that allows you to connect to an external screen or monitor, and if you use a wireless keyboard or a wireless mouse, you can have a Windows interface to increase your productivity and practically use this cell phone as if it were a small computer, although obviously with Android applications that are not as capable as Windows applications, but it is a good productivity tool, can also become a very prominent and strong point in this device. And like all Androids, comes with Android Auto to connect to the screen of your vehicle through its USB port, which by the way is 3.2 Gen 1 with good transfer speeds. And as for sensors, generally the key point is the proximity sensor, because the rest of the sensors are present, including gyroscope, geomagnetic field sensor, and many others. But the proximity sensor seems more like a contact sensor that activates when the device touches your face or touches your hand. It does not activate when it is close, but at least it is not a virtual sensor, so just make sure it is fully making contact for it to be enabled and work fine. The Samsung ecosystem can become one of its most attractive points. It seems to me that within the Android manufacturers, Samsung is the one that has a better developed ecosystem in conjunction with Huawei, because they are not so dependent on Google. Although Samsung tries to maintain a good relationship with Google, but it is not as dependent as other brands. We will find a good catalog of devices like Galaxy Buds, Galaxy Watch, Galaxy Tab, and in some countries Galaxy Book, and all have a good interaction between them to send files easily, to link easily, or from the watch take pictures from the watch. Control things from your headphones and many other things in general is a very good ecosystem that has technologies such as multi-control, or continue the apps also from your cell phone directly on your tablet, or from the tablet answer calls coming into your cell phone, and similar things. Samsung is very much identified by not only collaborate with Google, but also has close collaborations with some other brands. For example, in the cloud storage offers direct integration with OneDrive, but obviously also integrates Google Drive, and control of home devices, has its own platform called SmartThings, where you can add your air conditioning, your refrigerator, your washing machine, your light bulbs, and many other things more. Have very good compatibility. You can control it even from the watch. So that's why I say that the ecosystem is really very strong and very good. Even offer you its own health platform as Samsung Health, where you also find different training plans among many other things more. Let's now talk about performance while we do the test of opening applications. This device incorporates the Exynos processor 2400, is a trimmed edition of the original Exynos 2400 that integrates the Galaxy S24, so it should be a very similar performance, at least in theory, because it also has a construction in 4 nanometers, which is quite advanced. Nevertheless, in the battery test we already saw that it is not so efficient. Apparently it is accompanied by 8 GB of RAM with up to 8 GB of additional virtual RAM. Although in Samsung we have never had a very good multitasking experience, but we checked at one point, it practically took 2 seconds to open each application, showing us that the processor is really very good. In this sense, the opening of applications is fast now. Let's see if it manages well its RAM memory, because it notes that Samsung always generates this type of small white screens when switching between applications. However, browsing within applications observed a smooth performance. Seems that simply the problem will be when we are switching between multiple applications, where we will generally see those white screens, although is not necessarily a restart of applications. Although if there are some times where we see reboots, but usually is a white screen that if we can resume where we were. But I think it is something that Samsung should optimize in general. Does not seem to have a good job of RAM memory, possibly because the system is quite heavy. So if you are a user who usually have many applications open at the same time and work with all of them, it is not a good job of RAM memory, possibly because the system is quite heavy. So if you are a user who usually have many applications open at the same time and work with all of them. I think this device is going to require that you have few applications open in the background if you want to have a little better performance, maybe 5 applications or something similar, because otherwise you're going to see constant reboots. Note that in this case, now that I close many more applications, we are seeing that the performance has improved, but we are still observing that in this case, now that I close many more applications, we are seeing that the performance has improved, but we are still seeing some problems. Has improved, but we are still seeing some reboots. However, I think it does perform better when you have less applications open. The internal storage is 256 gigabytes. That is something very positive, although it does not have micro SD card slot. But I think with 256 gigabytes, you have very good internal space. Now let's run a little test for you to see. That has a pretty good storage, has very good read speeds. Of course, the write speeds will be a little shorter, but in this sense does not disappoint at all. Seems that Samsung has not made too much cut in terms of quality. That has the storage, although we do not know officially what version of storage integrates, but it is definitely a very good experience. Now we move to our traditional test of exporting video, our several clips together that in total have a duration of 1 minute, all of them in 4K to be a test according to the price of this device, and is already finished in just 23 seconds, confirming again that it is a really very good processor. The only detail and drawback is that you need to have few applications open to maintain high performance. For games integrates the application called Gaming Hub, where we find various content that we can run without the need to download them, to not use so much internal storage, but are much more casual games. Of course, you can install more complex games, and in this case, within the Game Booster settings, we will find good options. For example, you can block anything while you're playing, such as notifications, special navigation gestures, automatic brightness, even Bixby or Edge panels to avoid any kind of accidental interaction with your device. We will also be able to activate automatic touch protection, so that in case you leave the phone with the game open does not consume as much battery. You can also have a touch protection option that will reduce the speed of the frames per second of the games while you have this option enabled, which will make when it is suspended is not consuming so much energy. You can also enable or disable the shortcut bar, and also if you want to have a pop-up shortcut as a floating button, also allows you to configure how you want to leave the screenshots and in what format, and allow you to use the charger power delivery to play without the power going through the battery. This way you ensure that the heating is less and the battery will never be discharging in the lab section. You can activate this alternative performance management that supposedly will give you more power but could also generate a little more heating that comes off by default, but we turned it on during testing also. And when opening a game, you can see that there will be this small panel where we can activate the lock while the game is downloading some content to not consume so much energy. We can also take screenshots, screen recordings, or even have this button to open an application in a floating window mode in order to answer a message or something similar without the need to close your game. There are additional options that we can open, how to activate the priority mode or download special plugins. These add-ons will also allow you to have a better experience when playing. You can also have a better experience when playing the game. Improved experience when playing. You can customize the performance of some content specifically from this section in case you want to decrease the graphic quality or decrease the frames. And if you want to give priority to performance or energy saving individually, you can also have some special sites for shooting games that are fully customizable. Although all these functions must be downloaded separately, but obviously they are free. You would also have a constant monitor of frames per second and consumption of CPU and GPU. In Call of Duty, the device gives us by default the very high graphic quality at a maximum level. Also, the ultra rate is available, but the quality drops to a medium level, so we gave priority to the maximum rate and the very high graphic quality. We activated some filter and also all the effects that are available, which as you realize are a good amount, although not absolutely all. Then we anticipate that it is not a processor with so much graphic compatibility, and the experience during the first minutes was pretty good. Good stability, showed good stability, very slight low peaks that did not become a big problem. However, there was a moment while we were recording the screen when the device began to stay too frozen, giving a completely fatal experience, constant freezes, and very prolonged to be a device so expensive. So we returned to run a similar test, but now with the alternative management enabled, and again while recording the screen, the device can get to have very important freezes, therefore not recommended for recording gameplays and therefore not recommended for recording gameplays. So it is not recommended for recording gameplays. Originally it had reached about 40 degrees Celsius, but when we kept doing other tests it got up to 42 degrees Celsius in this game, which is still not that complex, so it is definitely not a good experience to play. And if you are going to record screen, it is a complete disaster. I do not recommend it. Then we gave priority to the ultra refresh rate, and in this case it performed quite well. Again, it had some low peaks which can be noticeable, but it is not something as bad as when it was recording the game, so it is definitely not a good experience to play. And if you are going to record screen, it is a complete disaster. I do not recommend it. In this case, it is curious that it let us play in this ultra quality without the need to select the lowest graphic quality, so it really goes very well. In fact, curiously here, it did not behave badly recording the screen in general. It kept a good performance, so it seems that the problem was when we gave higher priority to the graphic quality in this content could be corrected through an update, or at least I hope so. But really, like many Galaxy, it is not recommended for gamers. And in the Legends game, we changed the auto setting to an ultra setting at 60 frames per second, and in the initial stage it tried to go up to 120 frames per second, but after a bit of instability it was set to 60 frames per second. However, in this case it kept dropping. It didn't seem to maintain a stable experience, so the stability really is low with several fluctuations, although I remind you we set it to ultra quality, which we generally put on fully flagship devices. However, at this price point there are few devices, so it's a bit tricky to select which test to give it. Possibly if we had played at a slightly lower quality it would have performed better, which overall, as I say, isn't bad, but more demanding gamers are going to need something more advanced. In the SpongeBob game, we selected the high resolution and quality at 60 frames per second with smoothing enabled, and in this case the experience was much better. Note that we did not select the highest possible graphics quality, so I think if you set the graphics quality one notch below the highest you could still have a good experience. The game ran smoothly without too much overheating. In fact, relatively cool, so the disaster we saw in Call of Duty might seem an exception. However, I could not assure you it would not happen in other content. On Gente Impact by default it has the medium graphics quality for the test. We went up to the high level at 60 frames per second, and with this content it started off slightly unstable but then had a much more stable experience. You can see it on their graph, so it really is a device that in some scenarios behaves very disastrous and in other scenarios very good. We were able to get a very good experience. Scenarios very good in People Impact specifically surprised us to get to have a temperature so well controlled, and with high frames per second recording the screen there are more complications. Suddenly there are freezes but are light, not as we saw in Call of Duty. Then we could conclude that it is a good device to play but not so much to record gameplays. Yeah, as a conclusion, I think we are facing a device too expensive for what it offers. Although it has all the Galaxy suite and that is not available in cheaper devices, I think that the launch price is put to compete with high-end devices of past generations, or even the current high-end may be close to that price. Then I think the success of this device depends heavily on its price of its price. If you find it at a much lower price, closer to 10,000 Mexican pesos, which would be more or less $500, I think it would make much more sense to buy. But if you find it at a higher price, it seems to me that it would not be so recommended. For the moment, we have reached the end of this video. I hope you liked it. If you did, you know you can indicate it, and we'll see you next time.